Hello, everyone. My name is Melody. Thank you all so much for joining us in today's exciting AMA. We have Audrey Tang here, the Digital Minister of Taiwan. And we are, but first I wanted to introduce ourselves really quickly. So my name is Melody. I'm the Director of Magic here at Hack Club, where I help run the student community and put together awesome events like these AMAs. If you want to, feel free to check us out online at hackclub.com and at hackclub on Twitter. We're a nonprofit trying to build the best place on the internet to be a teenager into technology. And we host weekly AMAs like this. We try to host weekly AMAs like this a few times a month. So today we have Audrey Tang, and next week we have Patrick Collison, the CEO of Stripe. So we have a whole hour here, and I don't want to take up all this time. So I guess we should get started then. So Audrey, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and a story of your experience in education?
Sure. Hello, I'm not Melody. I'm Audrey. I'm really happy to be here virtually on this AMA. I'm joining through a browser because in Taiwan we're still negotiating with Zoom. We banned Zoom as I downloaded software. Just some stories when I was a teenager, I guess. So unlike many people today, I'm an optimist when it comes to innovation in the bureaucracy. I think the bureaucrats are the most innovative people. And this strange condition began when I was 15 years old. It was 1996. I discovered that the future of human knowledge is on the World Web, which was just being invented then, and my textbooks were out of date. So I told my teachers I want to quit school and start my education on the World Web. And surprisingly, all my teachers agreed with it. So I dropped out of junior high school, founded a startup, working on web technologies, and I get to join this fabulous internet community that runs with this crazy idea. It's called an open multi-stakeholder political system that powers the internet to this day. So today, as Taiwan's first digital minister, I'm putting into practice that I learned when I was couch surfing as a teenager. I traveled through, I think, more than 20 cities, sleeping on random people's couches, co-writing papers and software until they get fed up with me and have to buy me another rail ticket so I can visit the next one. And the ideas that I learned at that time on the global open source and free software community was about rough consensus. That is to say, people who can live with each other's idea rather than agreeing vehemently. Rough consensus, civic participation, and radical transparency. And surprisingly, it's working. It's transforming our society. This principle, which I called optimize for fun, is now part of the three pillars of the counter-coronavirus strategy in Taiwan. We call it fast, fair, and fun. And I'm happy to share with you on some of the stories, depending on your questions.
All right, thank you so much, Audrey. I guess we're gonna dive straight into questions here. So I guess our first question comes from Sam Podair. He runs a hack club in Singapore. Sam, are you on here?
Hi, my name's Sam. Yeah, I'm a hack club leader in Singapore. So in Singapore, we got like a variety of contact tracing tools which are digital, and they're accepted by basically everyone. Like everyone's using it. We scan the QR codes when we enter buildings with the app that tracks who's around us and like that sort of stuff. But like in the Western world, like in America and stuff, people are more skeptic about this sort of thing. So I was wondering, how do you think we can balance user privacy with the functionality of these sort of tools? And probably more importantly, how can we develop like trust in government organizations to collect this sort of data? Yeah.
Okay. So the two question is how to balance the tension between privacy and public health. And the second is how to make sure that people trust the government more during the pandemic. Is that the question? Okay, great. The second question is easier to answer, so I'll tackle that. I think that people should not trust their government. I think the government should trust its people. If the government trusts the people by making the state transparent to the people, then sometimes the people trust back, but that's not the end goal. The end goal is that the social sector, the stakeholders, the citizens will trust each other more because they understand what's going on. In Taiwan, we have this distributed ledger where you can see each pharmacy's medical mask stock level in real time. It's updated every 30 seconds, now every 3 minutes, because there's no queuing anymore. But everybody can see using more than 100 tools what is your most nearby pharmacy that still have medical mask. If you're a child, you can get 10 per 14 days, 9 per if you're adult. And when you go and swipe your national health insurance card, which covers 99.99% of people, you get your ration mask, and after a couple of minutes you refresh and actually see the stock level depleting in real time. And if it rather increases, you call 1922 and report a bug in the system. And so this kind of distributed ledger, unlike traditional ways of asking people to trust the government, you don't have to trust the government, but you do trust your neighbors and fellow citizens who can watch this system works fairly for you. And so this is working with the people, not working for the people. And I'm working with the government, not for the government. That's the basic idea of such innovation. The first one about privacy. I think we need to enhance privacy. Privacy is not just to defend personal data and so on in a defensive maneuver or strategy. We need to actively work on applications that enhance privacy. In Taiwan, we have an online hackathon jointly with the United States called CoHack at cohack.tw, cohack.tw. The Co stands for, I guess, collaboration, but also coronavirus. The counter coronavirus hackathon, one of the top winners, actually most of the top winners of the 5 winners, all built tools that enhance privacy while enhancing public health. For example, one of them builds a logboard that logs your temperatures, whereabouts, symptoms, and so on, but it works in airplane mode, meaning it doesn't really transmit any data out, no Bluetooth or GPS or whatever signals. It's all stored just in your phone. And when the contact tracers come to you, the medical officer interview you, the software automatically generates in their jargon, in the pandemic response system, precisely the kind of numbers, the kind of signals that they need for contact tracing. But it doesn't divulge any private information about people who interact with you. So this is actually more privacy preserving than traditional interviews, where you will probably say a lot about other people's privacy and their whereabouts. And so in Taiwan, we have never deployed any Bluetooth or other application level contact tracing mechanisms, precisely because we had no experience doing that before the pandemic. We did not do that during SARS. Instead, we rely on the data that's already being collected. For example, the cell phone signal strength triangulation. And so we use that to build our border control system. When you return to Taiwan, you either go to a quarantine hotel, in which case it's physical, or you stay at your home if you live with no other elderly or vulnerable people. And then your phone, if it exceeds the 50-meter radius, an SMS is sent to the local household managers or police to make sure you don't break the quarantine. But otherwise, it doesn't collect any new data. And by the end of the 14-day quarantine period, there's no constitutional basis for us to continue the digital fence anymore. And the great thing about this is that people understand very transparently how it works. It's within the constitutional limits. It beats, physical barricade and lockdowns. And that's why we can counter coronavirus with no lockdowns nor takedowns. I hope that answered your question.
Oh, all right, thank you. Yeah, that's amazing. So I actually live, in America, a country with a bunch of COVID cases, and we are only now, starting to embrace technology as part of our contact tracing methods. And I feel like, Taiwan is like a model that other countries should absolutely follow. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, thank you. So our next question comes from, sorry if I get your name wrong, Avni?
Yeah, hi, I'm Avni. I'm a high school freshman in Connecticut. And you've described yourself as a conservative anarchist. So I was wondering what that means for you and how you would envision society under that ideology.
Okay. Anarchism means that people work together voluntarily without any coercive action. And so as a minister, I call myself a lowercase minister, means that I advocate and preach about sustainability and digital transformation, but I have never given a single order, like the executive order, to any of my peers, nor did I accept any order from any of my peers in the public sector or really in any sector. And that's what anarchism means to me. Conservative means that I'm not a bomb-throwing anarchist, that I respect the more than 20 national languages in Taiwan, many more cultures. We see that Taiwan here, we have absolute freedom of speech and assembly. According to Civicus Monitor, we're the only country in the whole of Asia with a completely open civil society, and we intend to keep respecting all the different traditions of the Austronesian indigenous people, of the new immigrants, of all the various biosphere, biodiversity. In the ocean in Taiwan, there's 10% of the world's marine species, and so on. And we intend to conserve these as well as the internet culture of, as I said, rough consensus running code. That culture too is part of the transcultural landscape in Taiwan. So that's what I mean by conservative. So in practice, it means that I'm working in a very transparent manner. Anyone's welcome to visit me. I'm working literally in the park. You can see people playing basketball around that red building there. There's a meeting hall. There's Lego blocks made out of, I guess, sustainable bungalows. There's no walls. People can just walk in from the street and have 40 minutes of my time. And the only thing I ask is like this conversation, either the video or the transcript is published to the internet so that when people come and lobby, they have to make arguments that appeals to everybody on the internet, which means they often argue for public benefit and the global goals instead of their private interest. And then these arguments build on one another so we can find shared values out of common positions without any coercive action.
Oh, wow, that's wonderful. All right, yeah, I wish that I'd love to see like more government officials like be more transparent with and what they do. So, do you have any? Do you have any like ideas or suggestions on like what what do you like to see other people in government do to be like more transparent and open?
Mm-hmm. So I think there's two main things. First is that it's easier to be transparent if you have no idea what's going on. If you have already made a decision, then you probably feel that you need to defend the decision. But if you are just exploring, discovering possible ideas, then in design thinking terms, the first half of the first diamond in the double diamond model, then this discovery stage, you can be wide open because you're basically saying, I don't know what's going on, please share with us what's going on. So it's easier the earlier it is. The second thing is that by being transparent and radical transparency, I mean transparency at the root. So it doesn't mean that I automatically live stream on my meetings. I usually make a transcript and we co-edit for 10 days, 10 working days if they're a public servant. And so if they inadvertently say something about an anecdote concerning their friend who have not cleared it for publication, they have plenty of time to remove that part away. But remove that part takes time. And being completely open is by default. So most of the time, we still get most of the context through. And of course, you can only edit your part of the speech.
All right, wonderful. So our next question comes from are you on?
Yep, right here.
Cool.
Cool. Audrey, thank you for being here. My question is about charter cities. And basically just like, what's your opinion on charter cities? And do you think they're a viable option for tech hubs in the coming years or the coming decade?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, by the way, I'm a grade 11 high school student from Canada.
Right. So a charter city basically is a kind of mini city state, right? Aside from military and defense and stuff, it runs its own system, right? Is that the basic idea?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I think it makes sense to basically see it as a sandbox. With the idea of open innovation. In Taiwan, we do have the idea of a sandbox, but we don't call them charter city because it could be, instead of a city scope, it could be around the river. If you want to try, I don't know, self-driving boats, which is the thing. Or it could be the Social Innovation Center here as part of a contemporary cultural lab. We also try self-driving vehicle here, or the National Taiwan University campus where they try e-scooters and so on. So basically a predefined area that runs by a different set of rules with the intention system where people understand that it may fail, but if it does fail, then it shares how exactly it feels. So we thank the investors, I guess, who work with these new rules. For it's like reverse lottery. They lose a lot, everybody learn a little, and that's great. But if it works, then of course the entire country can then replicate this idea, and then it benefits the entire nation or the entire country or entire world. So as long as it's open innovation, instead of just closing a closed loop within itself, it's ready to share its both failures and successes. I think a sandbox model within a charter city, it was a kind of variably sized city. I think it's a good idea.
All right, cool. What? Cool. Our next question comes from Jacob H. Jacob, are you in here?
Yeah. So, sorry. My name is Jacob Happ. I am from Ohio in the United States. And my question is, as the first transgender official within the Taiwanese cabinet, what do you think your accomplishments will mean for the future of LGBTQ representation and acceptance within Taiwan's government and in the future moving worldwide?
Great question. So I'm according to Wikipedia, which is very reliable as we know, according to Wikipedia, I'm the first openly transgender cabinet member in the world. And I say openly because maybe everybody else is transgender. They just didn't, to go out of the closet. But in any case, so I think it's an encouragement because I signal to everybody that I'm taking all the sides. I'm nonpartisan. I can take the sides of all parties. I'm non-binary, meaning that I don't think there's half of the population who are different from me. So I think this is a inclusive politics, and it sends a signal that LGBTIQ A plus whatever is a strength when it comes to governance and public governance. It's not that we're a minority or something, but rather having gone through two puberties enable me to a better listener, and it encourages everybody to do a little bit more transgender. For example, there was in the fast fare phone system, the fast part came from the hotline during the pandemic, and everybody can call 1922 and share their idea. And one of the idea is quite transgender. There was a young boy who refused to go to school because the ration mask in their part of the city only have pink medical mask. When you ration mask, you don't get to pick the color. And then the boy said, I don't want to go to school because people may laugh at me for wearing pink medical mask. And so someone tell the 1922 this brilliant idea that all of you should wear pink medical masks regardless of your gender. And they did that the very next daily press conference. And everybody switched their Facebook and Instagram photos avatars pink as a solidarity. And so everybody become a little bit more transgender after that. And then the mainstreaming of this non-binary gender stereotype breaking thing become a norm, and people feel comfortable wearing pink medical mask anywhere. And so I think it's a positive thing that everybody can consider more of this gender non-binary viewpoints.
All right, thank you so much. So like as someone who, identifies as like non-binary and trans myself, like seeing people that kind of look like me successful just means a lot. So I'm very glad that you're taking the time to, come join us today. So next question comes from Dina.
Hi.
Hey everyone, I'm Dina. I lead a hack club in Milton, Ontario, near Toronto in Canada. So my question for you is, how did you get started with cybersecurity? Cybersecurity is something that my hack club tries to implement in our workshops. So I'd love to know how you got started in your journey.
Okay, great question. Cybersecurity really is an art, and I'm just an amateur artist at that. I'm more of a civic hacker than a InfoSec hacker, but I do enjoy exploring the limits of the system. My primary language, computer language, is called Perl. And Perl is often used in all sorts of things, including cybersecurity, in the early days. And we played this game called the Perl Golf. Pro-Golf means that you try to write a program to achieve a predefined task, but you compete by having less keystrokes than your PS. That is to say, if someone writes a program that takes 50 characters to do something, you can write something that takes 30 characters to do that. And to win, on the Pro Golf, which I participated quite frequently back in the days, you need to learn every single part of the language and break out of the language designer, which is Larry Wall's imagination, and try to. I think having a predefined goal that's fun, that's intrinsically rewarding, and just like penetration testing and other cybersecurity activities, challenge yourself and have a kind of scoreboard where you can compete with the peers. I think this is just the traditional CTF format or whatever format. I think it's already pretty well honed by now. And so people who gets interested on that sort of thing, the professional artists will continue then to excel and to do, I don't know, threat hunting and things like that. Whereas the rest of us, the amateur cybersecurity hackers, can still learn from the best artists in the red team by purple teaming, meaning that they share with us how they think. And we in the blue team understand a little bit of how red team thinks. So in Taiwan, 5 to 7% of all IT budget goes to precisely this sort of purple teaming. So we ensure that our white hat hackers are well paid, well regarded, meet with the president and minister all the time, so they don't fall to the dark side, which always have more cookies. And we're looking to increase in the next 4 years the budget from 5 to 7% of IT budget to 5 to 7% of the total budget, which is a lot of money because cybersecurity is seen as the priority industry in Taiwan. So of course, economic incentive also works, but that only works if you are well integrated into the community. Before we integrate into the InfoSec community, actually external rewards may actually distract. So that's my answer.
All right, wonderful. That's amazing. Next up, we have Alishan.
Hey, my name is Alishan. I lead a hack club in Mason, Ohio in the States. I just had a question. If you had to recommend a book for everybody in the world to read, what would you recommend?
Mm-hmm. Well, for everybody in the world to read is quite a tall order. But you just said read, you did not say comprehend. So I'm going to say my favorite book, which is Finnegans Wake by James Joyce. I translated part of that book toward the end of the book. I still have not finished reading it, but it's like a musical note. It's basically a musical note written in alphabets, and just listening to the notes. I used to write a Perl chatbot that when I was a teenager, every time I wake up, I just say river run, which is the first word in that book, and the bot randomly reads aloud or quotes a part of the Finnegans Wake, a random sentence, and that kind of become the keynote of my day. I don't do that anymore, but it is really good for that sort of purpose. So Finnegans Wake.
Oh, that's so cool. All right. Our next question comes from Caleb.
I'm Caleb Hagner. I'm a sophomore I'm in 10th grade at Goffstown High School in New Hampshire in the United States. I was just wondering, during the Arab Spring, we saw technology being used both by a tyrannical government and by those rebelling against a tyrannical government. With the advent of more advanced technologies like machine learning that could possibly be abused, do you think we'll see it continue to be used equally by both sides, or to be abused by a government that has much more resources at its means than the rebels?
Right. There's actually 3 sides in this. There's the state, there's the market or the capitalist system, and of course there's the social sector. And they work by different rules of exchange, right? In the market, you can freely exchange with anybody, but the exchange is asymmetrical. The party with more data, the party with more governance power, the party with more computational power kind of automatically wins the bargain. That is the root of surveillance capitalism, which is a book. And in the state, although ostensibly it's fair if it's democracy, everybody gets precisely 1 vote instead of in the market where every dollar usually gets 1 vote. The problem of the state is that it's a centralized organ. So without a good participatory mechanism, the bit rate of which we participate in the state decision-making through democracy, which is roughly 3 or 4 bits every 4 years, which is called voting, is not enough bandwidth to reflect the true state of the society to inform the state's direction. So it suffers from a coordination problem. Now, the social sector, of course, such as Ethereum, that's a really good social sector example because it's just people who live and join at any given time, and the governance model is pre-agreed by the set of algorithms instead of by voting or anything. Of course, it also depends on Vitalik's mood. So it's not. I'm not saying that it's a democracy. I'm just saying that it's in the social sector. So what I'm trying to say is that machine learning and AI, which I always say is assistive intelligence, there is no inherent good or bad about the three sectors, but rather all the three sectors need to work on the parts where they excel best for the social good. For example, the social sector is really good at exploring, at discovering novel innovations, but it's not good at all to ensure the fairness of how that is distributed. So the state, of course, can ensure the fairness. For example, in Taiwan, broadband is a human right. We make sure that when we deploy 5G, we start with the place that has the least 4G connection. Everywhere in Taiwan, if you don't have 10 megabits per second at about $16 per month, unlimited data connection is my fault personally. You can find me. Because of that, the state then takes those social innovations and make sure it's fairly distributed. Of course, then the economic sector can go in, but then it have to adhere to the social norm that's already set and just scale out those social norms instead of asking the society to adapt to novel technologies. And AI used this way, which is what I call the norm first approach. It's a diamond shaped by Lawrence Lessig called New Chicago School, that you start with the norm and then the market work with the norm, and then the code makers work with the market, and finally the law and regulations make sure that it's a fair distribution. This social, public, private partnership makes sure that AI become assistive intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. That is to say, it makes sure the social norm works even better rather than destroy or disrupt the social norm. And that is mainly the Taiwan model of innovation. But if you work the other way around, which is the private sector discovering technologies, but without understanding inclusiveness or fairness, and asking for the public sector to regulate these technologies before the society is even ready for deliberation, and then forcing the society to accept such technologies, then of course all this over-concentrating of power will happen. So I always say technology is a great amplifier. It amplifies whatever the philosophy your society does. And I, of course, hope that liberal democracy and the social sector actually dominates the controllership, the joint controllership of data and code, and the state just ensure that everybody has a fair opportunity, and the capitalist society then joins in, but only on the way that ensures the fairness is still conserved. That's what the conservative part in conservative anarchists also mean.
All right, awesome. Our next question comes from Matthew.
Hi, I'm a club leader in the Los Angeles area in California. So I have one long question and one short question. The first question is, given your unorthodox background in education, how do you think that technology can be used to give students more flexible options, especially in a culture like Taiwan where traditional education is pretty highly valued? And my second short question is tabs or spaces.
Yeah, like indentation.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good question. So first of all, I press tab, but the editor, I think, translate that into spaces. So both tabs and spaces. I press tab, it becomes spaces. Okay, so, and long question. I think that the point here about education is that it's a lifelong learning journey. In Taiwan, we changed the curriculum starting last year so that everybody learns about, for example, digital and media competency rather than skill or literacy. I think in the Western world, some people say literacy. And I don't really like the word media literacy or digital literacy because it assumes that people are in the young age are consumers, readers of information only. But when we say media competence, digital competence, we assume younger people are actually more advanced producers of media and digital creativity works. And that flips it around because then teachers and professors in a media competency classroom has nothing to teach. They just share their materials, often Creative Commons and so on, so that the students can choose the topics they're interested in and pursue those topics instead of doing individual to individual competition, which was the main shortfall of the East Asian, Taiwan included, education system, because the individual to individual competition builds the wrong kind of self-esteem. Because it's all relative, it's fragile, right? If you're a second in class and the first in the class, moves to another city, you become the first in the class, so you feel better. But actually, nothing changed. So that's why in our new curriculum starting last year, we did away with all these things, and we make sure that it's problem-based learning based on your chosen trajectory. And so, if you're interested in, for example, domesticating assistive intelligence, you can go to the social innovation lab, play with our self-driving tricycles, and tinker with them without worrying about your class, because you're building competency. And this journey will lead you to people who start from different places, different cultures, different regions, but working on the same problem, rather than arbitrarily for people in the same class to run on the same kind of pathway on the same track. You choose your own track, so you win by running, right? That's I think there's a movie about that, Ready Player One or something. So anyway, so that is the basic idea of the education reform, and I'm really happy that it's now part of our K-12 education starting last year.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. So I absolutely love the questions coming for our students so far. So yeah, if you, once again, just a reminder, if you want to ask a question and you're on this call, just feel free to raise your hand and we will pick on you. Cool. So yeah, I also believe that you're our first AMA guest to prefer, to use spaces indentation.
No, I prefer tab. Tab. It's just the editor that turns to the static space.
Got it. All right, that's cool. Cool. Our next question comes from Elizabeth.
Yeah, so hi, Audrey. Thank you so much for coming to speak with us today. And my question was, so like Taiwan and US, there's been a lot of like political polarization lately, especially in Taiwan with the DPP and the KMT. So I really look up to you as like being independent, and how do you really like deal with political talk and keep your stance while like both parties are like kind of polarized? And also, do you try to bring people together in politics?
That's a great question. So, but first of all, in our parliament, there's now 4 parties. 4 major parties. There's more parties, but there's the TPP, the Taiwan People's Party, by Mayor Ko Wen-je, the New Power Party, and the Democratic Progressive Party, the DPP, and the Nationalist Party, the KMT. So because there's 4, I think the polarization has eased a little bit, simply because there's more to choose from. So that's the first thing. And also, I always say that I work with the government. I don't work for the government. So it's easier to have no party affiliation when you give no order and take no orders, right? I'm working actually not for Taiwan people either. I'm working with the Taiwanese people, but with a community that's international. I'm also on the board of 3 international organizations, in addition to my day job as a lowercase minister. So I think taking a more global view, making sure that what we do not only benefits people from Taiwan, but also makes it easier for Taiwanese people to benefit other people. For example, I designed this app that makes sure that people who have uncollected rations because they already have masks or something, they can dedicate those to international humanitarian aid for the frontline medical workers in need. And so far, in Taiwan Can Help Us, you can find more than 300,000 names and more than 300,000 anonymous people who collectively dedicated more than 5 million medical masks for humanitarian aid everywhere else. And this is basically saying it's not the Taiwan government, it's the Taiwan people who are helping the world. And this kind of design, this kind of participatory design and mechanism design unites everybody, regardless of your political party affiliation. Everybody in Taiwan believes in the democratization that's continuing, is our continuing journey. And everybody believes that we're a global citizen, that we need to help the international community. So by choosing to only work on these topics, it also just unifies people of all political affiliations kind of by default.
All right, wonderful. So we have about 10 minutes left. So we're going to try to get through as many questions as we can. So I like to call this a lightning round. So if you can, like, keep your questions short and keep your answers short, because I want to get to as many, because we have several hands up and we have 10 minutes to go. So let's do this. Next question comes from Shrey.
Hey, Audrey, my name is Shrey and I'm a 12th grader from Seattle. And Taiwan is known for their great internet access. And how can other countries follow Taiwan's lead to expand internet access to more of their population?
Yes. In Taiwan, in our 5G spectrum auction, there's a associated guarantee that, as I said, you need to start with the lowest resource places. And it's a tradition. We did that in our 4G, we did that in our cable and DSL and so on. So you need to design your auction rules so that the winning bidders also have extra bits of money. And that extra bits of money is predetermined to allocate to power the lower resource people.
Cool. Next question comes from Kai. Kai, are you in here?
Yes. Sophomore in the Silicon Valley, and I want to ask you, since you've been in tech for so long, what is a flaw that you've seen in the tech industry?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good question. So actually, my job description is my answer to that question. So I'll just very quickly read my job description. My job description as digital minister and not the tech minister is this. When we see the Internet of Things, let's make it an Internet of Beings. When we see virtual reality, let's make it a shared reality. When we see machine learning, let's make it collaborative learning. When we see user experience, let's make it about human experience. And when we hear the singularity is near, let's always remember the plurality is here. That's my answer.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the most actionable job descriptions I've ever seen. That's amazing. Next comes from Mukao.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So what I wanted to ask about was your idea of conservative anarchism. So you said that you supported this. So do you think it's more feasible or only feasible for conservative anarchism to exist in smaller countries like Taiwan, or do you think it's feasible even in larger countries? Because as the size of the population grows, it obviously becomes way harder for a government to maintain order properly if it's completely voluntary.
Mm-hmm. Well, 23 million people is not a small city, right? 23 million people is quite a few people and just packed very densely. And 20 national languages is quite transcultural. It's not a monoculture. So Taiwan is reasonably sized. But I think that the point here is that you can always start small. You can start in a township, in a village, in your university or whatever, and try out radical transparency, voluntary association, location independence, rough consensus, and the other principles. And when these ideas spread, and it's worth spreading, as long as the R value is larger than 1, those ideas spread voluntarily. And the great thing about internet protocols is that it doesn't need a concentrated person forcing everybody to adopt. When a good new idea like BitTorrent or Ethereum comes to life, there's nobody who can say that, oh, you cannot run this node or something like that. So the hardest job in the world starts out easy. The great affair of the world starts small. And so you don't have to deal with great things, but you can get great things done by trying out a very small scale experiment and documenting meticulously how you do it and make sure that everybody learns about it. That's social innovation.
Awesome. So our next question comes from Theo.
All right. Hey, Audrey. I'm Theo. Thank you so much for coming. I'm 16. I live in Boston. And so my question is, you said earlier that you were optimistic about bureaucracy. And, if you see what's going on in the US right now, and a lot of these things are due to a very bloated bureaucracy, what makes you optimistic?
Mm-hmm. I think people who are public career servants care about public service. Otherwise, they have better jobs to choose from. So in Taiwan, what we pride ourselves is that the people who grow up with democracy, because we only have our first presidential election in 1996, is also the generation that lives with the World Web. So for us, internet democracy, not two things, it's the same thing. And that also makes democracy for us just another technology. Just another set of technologies, which is why I refer to voting as, bit rates, uploading, participatory budgeting, sandboxes, presidential hackathons, quadratic voting, and so on. So when you see democracy as a set of technologies in the toolkit, then the public service becomes the technologists that design for participation. And when you do participatory mechanism design, the public servant doesn't act in a way that assume top-down hierarchical control. Rather, they can freely work out loud because, hey, they're just figuring out the governing mechanism with everybody in the social sector and in the economic sector. So I think it boils down to how bureaucracy functions. If the bureaucracy functions in a siloed way, then of course all the distrust, as you mentioned, becomes apparent because they don't trust the citizens by the design of the silos, right? So to give no trust is to get no trust. But if you begin with trust, then of course, then you get some trust back.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So our last question will come from Zach Latta, founder of Hack Club. Zach, are you here?
I am here. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
All right, amazing. So with Hack Club, we started 6 years ago, and I think ideologically we agree a lot with all of our code has been open source since the very beginning. Recently completely opened our finances. You can see our entire bank account, every transaction in it. And I think one thing that we were really trying to do is we want to build an organization that's not going to be here for the next 5 years, but for the next 50, and maybe for the next 100. So my question to you is what do you think the most important things that happened in the 1900s? Like, what do you think the most important things that happened then were? And what do you think the most important things that will happen over the next 100 years will be?
Sure. So I don't know that whether an organization should last for that long. I mean, some people don't last for that long. But an idea of an organization, a new organization type, that is what will last so long. Which is why I always say distributed ledgers instead of blockchains, right? Because one is an idea and one is a technology. Technologies change, organizations change, but the ideas spread and mutate and gets better. And so my main advice would be saying that nowadays, in the next decade or so, the ideas that unites the world in international solidarity, for example, I don't know, use the soap properly, keep physical distancing, wear a medical mask. These things unite the world because people have first-hand experience, unlike previous global issues such as climate change, which affects everybody on a different time scale. The pandemic affects everybody on the same time scale. Every epicenter is just 2 months away from every other epicenter. So we have, as a humankind, the first taste of international collaboration and solidarity that works in real time rather than in batch mode. And more of that organizations, meaning lateral, multi-stakeholder organizations will grow. So part of the Hack Club, I think, idea is just people who are youngest and therefore have least constraints on the solution space can actually discover more on the solution space by asking questions out of the box, just as I did in the ProGov, outside of the box of the language designer. And we need to continue that spirit and document as you did, which is great, the financials, the organizations, so that more and more chapters can form. And whether they're called Hack Club or not really is not the point, because the idea is that young people need to show us the vector, the direction of future, and we, the older people, need to empower young people, amplifying their directions. And that is my suggestion.
Thank you very much.
All right, wonderful. So it looks like we are out of time here. So again, Audrey, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Can we give Audrey a quick round of applause?
Thank you so much, Audrey.
Yes,
Thank
absolutely.
you.